Children are really having fun doing the task, okay? Even if they, because they can see if they don't make it well, but they really, they classify that more in the gaming experience than in the testing experience, okay? And this is very important.
So two things. One is when I went to the field, and we couldn't test only few students in the school. So some other students kind of try to light up and say, can I play? That's one thing. But the other thing, I don't have the answer, but I do have the data. We test the same kid twice. One is one that I presented without any reward. And then we, almost a month later, we came back and we say, hey, now, you're gonna play the same one, but now you're gonna get the money based on your score. That will help answer some of your questions later. Quite fun.
I have a couple of questions from the Slido. The first is, how did you determine wealth? How did you define wealth?
Wealth in here, we use assets. So we ask about like how many refrigerators you have, how many air conditioners, TVs, cars, and then we do some principal factor analysis. Factor analysis is a statistical index.
Okay.
Because wealth is very difficult to calculate directly, but we use assets to be a signal for wealth.
The second question, I don't quite understand. What it says is, how is executive functions deployed in Thailand? How is it applied in education? Why must we only apply it in education? I think it's a reference to the test, which is, how did you, for instance, choose the schools that you were going to use?
Oh, for us, the first round of this survey, we already have the sample 8 years ago. The kids we follow wherever they go. They go to this school, we go to that school. So, that's what we sample ours.
Okay, so as part of that, you should explain that this was a validation exercise prior to a much larger rollout you're going to do.
Yes, and in June, we're going to launch an even bigger survey. So we're going to go to 10 provinces in the country. We're going to random some schools, both, in the city and in the rural. So we're going to collect about 2,800 children from kindergarten to 6th grade. So we're going to have 7 grades in total, about 400 each. So we should be able to do a standardized score for Thai children by then.
That's right. And within that, it will then, because of the numbers, you'll be able to compare more accurately rural versus urban, grade 1 versus grade 8, and also some of the schools that have been in EEF programs versus schools not in EEF programs.
Yes, we should be able to see something, maybe not definitely, but and I think that's the idea of this presentation, right? That I think what we do is to prove that EEF or other organizations can use this to measure the outcome of whatever they do. Right?
Yeah.
If you say, okay, we don't want to measure just knowledge, right? You don't want to measure by just NT or ONET, fine. This is EF, and it's not that difficult to implement. Maybe it's not as easy as NT that you have the whole class, but it's doable, and I think that's the whole idea.
And I think the final question is, why are you only applying it in education? Is simply that's where the children are. It's not simply a test of education, if you see what I mean. It's just, you could wander around the streets picking up children, but it's not so efficient.
Just logistic reasons.
It's logistic.
No, you want to measure kids in slum as well. But it's just logistic reasons.
Any more questions from in the room? Any thoughts or reflections from yourselves?
Any more questions? I'll ask a very technical question. So I'm curious about the factorial model, and if you have any hypotheses about why you're finding a two-factor model versus a three-factor one, and then just a thought without knowing your data in detail. I heard you mention principal components analysis, and I saw you were using Stata, and wondering if maybe principal components as a data reduction tool might be the incorrect model for the factorial analysis. But and I'm just curious of what thoughts you have for that.
So when we do simple principal component analysis, it turns out to be, the program will retain like 2 or 3 factors, but only one factor has eigenvalue bigger than 1. Though I think it's part of it because in principal component analysis, you don't allow for correlation between factors, right? That make a difference because when you go to confirmatory or structural equation modeling, so then you allow for correlation, and you can see correlation is very high. Yeah. Of course, it's not 100%, but it's high. So I think that's the reason why they behave differently, I think. And we would like to put the 3 in just because the original idea is try to have 3. If you want to check if it fit with that, but other than that, yeah, I still don't know yet.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. There's in fact a follow-up question to my colleague. I'm in the other extreme. I'm asking about you to test a single factor model.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm asking is because of the high correlations between the latent constructs.
Right.
So, that would lead me to suspect that the single factor model may be of interest. And it also, of course, helps if you build more advanced structural models. And then that's the first question. Then the second question, as it relates to differences across gender between the 2 different contexts. What were your findings?
Okay, I think they dropped this slide. So I've answered the second one first because it's easy. It turns out that gender doesn't really affect the outcome. So surprised me too. When we have a smaller sample, it seems doing something, but when we have 1,000, almost 1,200, then it's not significant in any specification. For the first one, I don't know, but we did try the first, the one factor with structural model, and in very simple model that we have only one. It doesn't fit the data as good as the 2 and 3. But when we run the independent factor, right, somehow it's kind of, it's still not. Well, it's not super clear, but somehow once you allow for correlation, we tend to go to the 2 or 3 factors.
Thank you very much. I have to confess that there were significant parts of the presentation which made no sense to me whatsoever, but I'm just really pleased that you told me it was all good news. Are there any other questions from in here? Yes.
One which tries to bring the conversation to the purpose of this event. Now that you proved that we can measure them, how is this policy relevant?
It's going to be a thermometer to measure any intervention that we do that we say we aim to improve EFs, right? Executive functions. I think this should be one of the thermometer that we use to measure that. And then it's a direct test. Of course, with some error, but I think it's manageable.
Yes, sir. Yes, I want to complement this question. Executive functions are so famous because it is demonstrated that it can make better predictions than any other variable from childhood to adulthood in terms of health, in terms of well-being, in terms of lack of mental problems, okay? And this is a very relevant question because we used to use only IQ or grades or whatever indicators to predict life outcomes. And it is demonstrated that executive functions are really very good predictors for that, of adult well-being. And I think this is a very relevant question because of the first conference I Sorry, I couldn't retain the name of the very inspiring first conference from today in the morning.
Oh, Dr. Vishon.
Yes,
Dr. Vishon.
Yes, because I think this makes sense to assess executive functions and not other cognitive variables like IQ or whatever. Okay, and I think this can orient better public policy, because if you can ensure that children are developing